After Rafiq's death, I told myself I would never go back. No more tombs, no more deserts. But Egypt doesn't let go that easily. Its stories cling to you, like dust you can't wash off. I moved to Luxor, hoping the Nile's calm would silence the nightmares. But the dreams only deepened. Every night I saw the same image, the priest, Amun-Ra, standing knee-deep in dark water, whispering my name, and behind him, thousands of hands rising from the river. I began to wake with sand between my sheets. Sometimes the mark on my arm burned, faint but alive. Doctors said it was nothing, but I knew better. The curse wasn't just following me, it was spreading. One morning, I received a letter, again with no name, no return address, only one sentence. The Nile remembers. Inside, there was an old photograph, black and white, torn at the edges, showing a dig site flooded by the river, and on the back, coordinates. I shouldn't have gone, but when the sun set over the Valley of the Kings, I found myself walking toward the docks, the photo still in my hand. The coordinates led to a small island, a forgotten sandbar between Luxor and Aswan. Locals called it Jazirat al-Samut, the Island of Silence. No one lived there. No one wanted to. I hired a fisherman to take me across. He refused to touch the island itself. When we reached the shore, he said, "Stay no longer than the moon's first light." Then he pushed away, vanishing into fog. The island was small, maybe a few hundred meters wide. At its center stood the remains of a temple, half buried in silt and roots. Columns jutted out like broken bones. Hieroglyphs faded into moss. But the most striking thing was the sound, a constant whisper, faint like wind passing through stone. Except there was no wind. I followed the sound into the temple's heart. The entrance led to a collapsed stairway descending into darkness. Each step echoed longer than it should have, like the air itself was stretching. At the bottom, water covered the floor, still, black, and perfectly reflective. As I shined my light, I saw carvings along the walls. They weren't prayers. They were warnings. Images of priests tearing out their tongues, eyes weeping black tears, and beneath them a single line repeated in ancient script: "The voice of Ra must never rise again." That's when I realized the whispering wasn't coming from the air. It was coming from the water. I leaned closer, and for a moment, I saw my reflection. But it wasn't mine. It was his. Amun-Ra's hollow eyes stared back, and his mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Then, the water rippled, and a hand reached out. I fell backward, scrambling to my feet as something brushed past my leg. The light flickered, and the whisper grew louder. not one voice, but hundreds echoing through the chamber. I turned to run, but the passage had changed. The stairs were gone, the doorway sealed. There was only one path left, deeper. The whisper turned rhythmic, almost like a chant. The walls pulsed with faint light, golden veins tracing hieroglyphs that seemed to shift when I looked away. At the end of the corridor, I found an underground chamber, half flooded, glowing faintly from beneath the water. In the center stood a statue, tall, cloaked, and faceless. Around its base were offerings, bones, rusted amulets, dried flowers, and something else. A human skull, carved with the same unblinking eye. The whispers stopped. For the first time, there was silence. And then a voice, deep, dry, familiar. You carry what is mine. The mark on my arm began to glow, brighter, hotter, until I screamed. The statue's head turned, stone cracked, revealing flesh beneath. Its empty sockets began to weep sand. I ran, splashing through the water as the chamber began to shake. The water turned red, thick like blood, and rising from it were faces, hundreds, each one whispering my name. I reached the stairway, somehow open again, and climbed until my legs gave out. When I burst into the open air, dawn had broken, but the fisherman was gone. The boat, gone. The island was silent again. Only the river moved, slow, heavy, endless. I don't remember how I got back to Luxembourg. Locals said they found me on the riverbank, half conscious, covered in silt. They thought I drowned. When I tried to tell them what I seen, they turned away. One old woman crossed herself and said, "The Nile feeds the dead. You drank from it." That night, in my hotel room, I found something on the windowsill. Wet sand, and drawn in it the same unblinking eye. I packed my things before sunrise and took the first train north, but the dreams followed. Now when I close my eyes, I see the island again. Only it's not silent anymore. The whispers are louder, clearer, like they're inside me. Sometimes I can almost make out the words. Feed the hollow sun. Free the priest. I know what they mean. The priest isn't dead. He's waiting beneath the Nile, gathering strength. And the mark on my arm, it's not fading anymore. It's spreading. I think the curse isn't just about the past. It's about return, a cycle. Each time someone opens the gate, the hollow sun burns a little brighter. And when it reaches its zenith, he will rise. I've started hearing another sound now, not just whispers. Footsteps from under the floorboards of my room. Every night, closer. Every night, louder. Until one day soon, the footsteps will stop And when they do, I'll know he's here. If you ever travel along the Nile and the water looks too dark to reflect the stars, remember this: some things buried in Egypt were never meant to be found.
After I escaped the island, I thought I'd left the curse behind. But curses don't care about distance. They travel with you, buried in your skin, whispering in your bones. I spent weeks in Cairo trying to convince myself it was over. Days blurred together. The city's noise helped drown the whispers, until one night it didn't. I woke to find the floor of my apartment wet, just a thin layer, enough to reflect the ceiling fan like a black mirror. And in that reflection, I saw something move, something standing right behind me. When I turned, there was nothing, only the faint scent of river mud. That same morning, a letter slipped under my door. Old paper, same handwriting as before. This time, only 2 words: the hollow sun. And below it, a map. It showed the western desert near Bahariya Oasis, a remote valley marked with a single red circle. Beside it, a symbol, the unblinking eye, half covered by sand. I don't know why I followed it. Maybe curiosity, maybe the curse itself wanted me there. Either way, I rented a truck and drove west. Hours passed. The desert stretched endless, dunes swallowing the horizon. No roads, no tracks, just silence. And that hum again. Low, pulsing, alive. By sunset, I reached the valley. It wasn't on any map. No signs of excavation, no modern footprints. Only wind-carved stones and one massive doorway, half buried, slanted, ancient. Above it, carved into the lintel, were words so worn I could barely read them. Here the voice of Ra sleeps. The entrance led into a long tunnel, lined with columns shaped like human figures. Each one had its mouth sewn shut. Their faces were twisted, frozen mid-scream. I tried not to look at them as I passed. The deeper I went, the warmer the air became. Not the heat of the desert. This was different, like standing near something alive, breathing. At the end of the corridor, the tunnel opened into a chamber, massive, circular. The ceiling painted with a golden disc, cracked but glowing faintly, as if lit from behind. And in the center stood an altar, covered in carvings of the hollow sun, a black sphere surrounded by bleeding rays. Around it 5 sarcophagi, arranged like points of a star, each one sealed with thick resin, the smell of rot still clinging to the air. I set my lantern down and knelt by the altar. Every inch of stone was etched with hieroglyphs, prayers, rituals, and something else, a diagram. It showed a man standing beneath the sun, his shadow stretching downward. But in the shadow, another figure rose, identical, inverted, holding a torch of black fire. I ran my fingers along the carvings, tracing the figure's mark. When I reached the shadow, my lantern flickered. Then it went out. In the dark, something moved. The air shifted, slow, deliberate, and from one of the sarcophagi came the sound of stone cracking. I grabbed my lantern and turned it on. The first sarcophagus had split open. Inside was no mummy, but only ash, and carved into the lid from within, a handprint. The mark burned again on my arm. This time, it didn't fade. I stumbled back toward the tunnel, but the walls began to pulse with light, lines of gold forming veins that converged toward the altar. And from the cracks in the floor, something began to rise. Not water this time, sand, swirling, alive, taking shape. It formed a human figure, tall, faceless, like the statue beneath the Nile. But this one was different. It spoke. The hollow sun feeds on seekers. Its voice was every whisper I'd ever heard, layered, infinite. I tried to speak, to move, but the air thickened like syrup. The mark on my arm spread to my chest, glowing through my shirt. The sand figure stepped closer. I felt the weight of centuries pressing down. Then, in the haze of dust and fear, I saw something, a flash carved into the wall behind the altar, a symbol I'd missed before. It wasn't Egyptian, it was older, a spiral of 7 lines crossing through an eye, the same symbol I'd seen in my dreams. I reached out, touched it, and the chamber went still. When the dust cleared, I was no longer underground. I was standing in the desert again, under the night sky, the stars perfectly still. The ruins were gone, no sign of the entrance, no truck, only sand, stretching in every direction. I walked until dawn, following nothing. When I finally saw signs of life, a road, a gas station, a man smoking outside, he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. He said, "You came from the valley?" I nodded. He dropped his cigarette and whispered, "There is no valley there anymore." Back in Cairo, I went to the archives, desperate for answers. Most records spoke of the cult of the hollow sun, a forbidden sect of priests who worshipped not Ra, but his absence, the void left when light dies. They believed the sun had 2 faces, one for the living and one for the dead. Their mission wasn't to summon the god, but to replace him. The more I read, the more I realized every tomb, every curse, every lost name in the sand was part of a single design. Not protection, but preparation. And somehow, I had become part of it. The mark wasn't just a curse, it was an invitation, a key. I thought of the water under the Nile, the island, the faces in the river, the whispering hands. All of it led here, to the hollow sun. Then I found one final note scribbled at the bottom of a 19th century excavation report, written in English, not hieroglyphs. 7 lights, 5 sarcophagi, 2 places, the island and the desert, 7. And one mark, mine.